ready to go. So, welcome to our Zoom. And
Gordon, go ahead. I'm sorry.
okay, great. So, welcome to our Zoom. Uh, it's another class tonight. And what we're going to do is to run through, just walk you through actually. Classic body was last week. This week it's the double tapered body and then a V-neck. All the things that we gave you last week actually have given you a basis for what we're going to do this week. So we may go a little bit faster. It may not take the full 2 hours, or it may, and then we'll have some questions, some times for some questions. So a lot of you have been getting your yarn orders in, and so it's really exciting. We're getting ready to start the schematics. And so we've come through 3 levels now, and we're moving into toward the 4th level of the DAL, and that's really an exciting moment for all of us. Okay, so
Hold on.
oh,
Can I
Murray, I'm
translate?
sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
はい、マスタークラスの2回目です。1回目にクラシックボディをやったので、それをベースに、今日はテーパードのボディと V ネックと、をやります。それからコンテストに参加の方は、系統を、オーダーしてくださったと思うんですが、それでスワッチを編んでください。ここから、スケマティックの作業の方へ移ります。スケマティックを出していただいた方はレベル3からレベル4に移動します。Okay.
Okay, great. All right, so without further ado, Quen, we're queued up now. And we are ready to do for the presentation.
じゃあプレゼンテーションに入ります。
Okay, so thank you so much. We can go to the next slide for sending in your swatches, and we are all, very excited. It was just so much fun watching everybody's swatches on Ravelry and seeing all the beautiful, beautiful submissions that came in and all the wonderful creative ideas. And that's all. That's what it's all about, right? That we are a creative community and we are joining hands to go through another one of these design alongs and to just be inspired by what all of us are going to come up with. So in this class, this is the design master class. This is part 2. It is the double taper. If we can go back for a second, Quinn. It's forward for a second. It's the double taper body, the V-neck, and the set-in cap. And the one thing that I'd like you all to remember is that they're all basically done the same way using different variations of the shaping formula. That's the increase decreasing formula. So we're going to walk through the double tapered body in about 30 minutes and then through the V-neck and how to plan a V-neck. And then we'll take a little bit of a break and come back and walk through the tapered sleeve and then through the sleeve cap. So last week when we started with the classic body, we're going to just take a look at how now we want to take some width out and follow the curves of the bodies. The top part of the body and the measurements and the exact gauge, it's all going to be the same. It's just that this is the empowerment part. So for example, if you're following a commercial pattern and you want to change the neckline or you want to change the sleeve or something, this is what will allow you to be able to do that. Just understanding how you can make a few changes and have a completely different garment. Sorry, Mari, go ahead.
That's okay. 基本的には先週やったクラシックボディに、シェーピングを加えていって、ダブルテーパーにしたり、それの形を変えたり、ネックの、形を変えたりします。基本的にはクラシックボディを基礎にしてますので、そこから始めて、バリエーションを作っていきます。
Okay, next, Quinn. All right, so this is just a bird's eye view of it, and that is that you see the color coding that lets you understand where you see the pink on the sides. That was the classic body. And then where you see the more aqua color coming in, you see how we've shaped from the hips to the waist, and then shaped again, shaped out from the waist and up to the bust. And that gives us a double taper.
今見ていただいているのが、ピンクのラインが、クラシックボディの、増減なしの、形です。で、青っぽいのがダブルテーパーといって、ウエストに向かって細くなって、ウエストから脇下に向かって広くなっている形です。
Okay, next. All right, so here we're just going to take a moment to look at, because we have a lot of material to get through tonight. I'm not going to start filling out everything. We're going to go to a page where we have the answers, but we'll walk through how we got the answers. Here, for example, we knew that last week we had 5 stitches and 6 rows to each inch, and we had 2 selvage stitches on. Quinn, can we come back to the page? Yeah, right there. Let's just hang out there. And that we had, for the bust, the classic body was based on the bust width. And for the bust circumference, and then we split it in half. And so that was all the 33 inches plus 2 inches of ease divided, 35 divided in half, that was 89 centimeters. So divided in half to the 44.5 centimeters or the 17.5 inches. None of that is going to change at the bust. Last time, for the classic body, the entire length of the garment up to the armhole shaping was based on that. Here, the measurements there are going to be several measurements: a hip measurement, a waist measurement, and a bust measurement. And that's what you see here, and it's all based on our gauge. Okay, Mari.
Yeah. 今見ていただいているスケマティックなんですが、先週やったたくさん今週たくさんやらなきゃいけないので、先週やったところは軽く流していきます。先週やったものはバストのぐるりプラスに、緩み、2インチを加えたものをベースにして裾から上に向かって編んでいきました。今回のは、ヒップの寸法、ウエストの寸法というのが関わってきます。
Okay, next. All right, so the first thing we're looking at is that if we take our eye to the top, then we see to the top of that schematic, then we see that 13.5 inches and the 70 is the same. We see that the bust measurement, which is 17.5, you can come down, Quinn, if you want to. Yeah, we're right there. Okay, yes. We see that the bust measurement is 17.5. We got the 90 stitches there. We see, which is 88 plus 2. We go up to the next horizontal line just above that, and we see where we've taken out for the armholes, and that we've got the 13.5 inches there. And so we've taken out 10 centimeters or 2 inches on each side. And so that is going to remain the same. However, in that part of the garment, we're going to introduce a new element versus, instead of a round neckline, we want to make this a V neckline. Okay, if we come down to the very bottom, which is where we'll start, yes, it's that first line, then we're going to start with 18.5 inches. So Mara, you want to start
Yeah.
for, okay?
Okay. この今見ていただいているスキマティックですが、先週やったのと同じ寸法が、バストとそれから背肩幅、クロスバックの、寸法になります。で、今回違うのが、ラウンドネックではなくて V ネックになります。それと裾がヒップから出している寸法なので広くなっています。
Okay, so the concept remains the same as we had with the sleeve, and it remains the same if we're doing, like a raglan or anything that's going to be shaped where we've got a larger number and a smaller number. So here, if we look at the numbers on the side, we're looking at the row numbers. And so off to the opposite side, Quinn, we've come down and we've broken it in half. Yes, there you go. So we're going to work for 3 inches straight. And usually, because we don't want to hang on the garment, we want to give it some structure. So we usually work at least 1 inch straight, and then we will start to do our hip to waist shaping. And so here we've got 3 inches that we're working straight, and that's 18 rows, because we're getting 6 rows to an inch. And then we're going to shape over 5.25 inches, and that's 32 rows. Okay, that's still based on the 6 rows is equaling 1 inch. From that point, we're going to work even for 1.5 inches, and that's going to be 8 rows or 4 centimeters. And that will give us a stop, and then we'll start to go out for the bust. Okay, Mari?
Yeah. 下から編んでいきますが、増減なしでこの場合3インチ編みます。この部分で裾がしっかりします。最低でも1インチ編んでください。でそれから、3インチの上に、5と4分の1インチのウエストに向かってのシェーピングのラインがあります。
Okay, so we're going to when we look at what we have at the waist and what we have in terms of number of stitches in the hip, we've got a 14 stitch difference. So we have 80 stitches at the waist, which is the second horizontal line up, and then the horizontal come down, Quinn, on the waist at the waistline on that schematic. Okay, so that's the hip. It's 94, and at the waist we've got 80. So we simply subtract 80 from 94. It tells us that we've got 14 stitches that we have to decrease between the waist and the bust of the hip and the waist, and we're going to do that over 5.25 inches, which is going to be over 32 rows.
ヒップのところの作り目が92目に2目足して、94目です。ウエストの位置のところが78目に2目端目を足して80目になります。これを94目から引くと14目の差になります。左右に分けて7目ずつ、3インチの上部分5と4分の1インチの分の32段から減らします。
So, are you still? Go ahead, Mara. Are you still translating?
No, I'm done.
Okay, so Quinn, go back, please. Okay, so this is the way that works. The same way with the sleeve. We're going to subtract the small number from the bigger number. We've got 14. We've got 80 being subtracted from 94. We divide it in half. We've got 2 sides to our garment. So that's going to give us 7 stitches that we're going to have to decrease on each side. And we're going to do that over the 32 rows. So I just want to take a moment to say, why are we writing all this here first? And that is to give us a complete roadmap of where we're going so that we can make a decision on how we would like to go. And so every single thing that we need to think of or try to remember, we want all of that on what's called a working schematic. And this is our working schematic.
で今なぜここでこれだけの計算をしなくてはいけないかというのは、どこがって いくかということをはっきりさせて進むということが必要なので、ここでしっかりした計算をしていきます。
Okay, so now we've got 7 that we're going to divide into 32. However, we want to stop right at that 3-inch mark and make a decrease. And as we think of the formula, we can use it in any way that we want. And we only want to use it to calculate parts that we want it to calculate for us, to organize and order the way we will have our increases or decreases work. Here, we're going to subtract that one row and subtract that one stitch on each side so that we know that we've gotten one stitch and one row out, and the balance is the way we're going to use the formula. So you see 6 into 31 instead of 7 into 32. And the answer tells us, looking at the top, it says we're going to increase one stitch on each side of every following 5th row, and we're going to do that 5 times. And then on each side of every following 6th row, we're going to do that once. Or we can just do that, increase one stitch and then increase one stitch at the edge of at both ends of the following 6th row, and then at the end, at each edge of every following 5 rows, 5 times. But this has told us how we're going to take those stitches out. And with this version, which is the length version versus the width version, it stops on the exact row that we need. We're not worrying about any extra stitches or any extra, it takes us right to the place that we need to be on. And then you see the math check off on the side, the 5 times 5 and the 6 times 1, which tells us we're going to do 6 decreases on each side over 31 rows. And we add that one, we know that one adds in the very first one, which is 7 and 32. I'm saying the whole thing because I know Mari knows this, and even if I don't tell it all, she can tell you what to do. Okay.
減目の方法は先週やった袖の増し目の方法と同じ計算式を使います。ただ違うのは、裾から3インチ上がったところで、両側で1目ずつ減目します。1目ずつ減目する段が1段あるので、これから先に使う減目の段数が31段となって、片側斜め減らすところが1段もすでに減らしてしまっているので6目になります。それで計算式が31割る6となります。これの答えが5段ごとに、1目を5回、6段ごとに1目を1回という形になります。Okay?
Okay, and so so we're at the waist now, and we've got 1/2 inches in our waist. The waist is straight, so we're just going to work those 8 rows, and which is 4 centimeters, and then we will start to work to increase from the waist to the bust. We're going to do the same thing. We take a look at the bust. It has 90 stitches in it, and we're going to take a look at the waist that has 80 stitches in it. And so that's going to tell us that we've got to take out 10 stitches. Okay, so it's going to be 5 on each side, and over how many rows? So we've already written out the total number of rows there. It's going to be 24 rows. And so we've got 5 stitches over 24 rows, and we do the same thing. We want to stop right at the top of that waist and not continue, because if we work to the waist width and then use the formula, then it's going to, the very first answer at the top tells us 5. So we would be going 5 rows higher, and we really don't want that. We want to stop there, which means we're going to take, instead of 5 stitches again, we're going to take 4, and instead of 24 rows, there will be 23. And so the number at the top tells us that we're going to now increase 1 stitch at each edge on the following 5th row, because that's only going to happen 1 time. Then at each edge on every following 6th row 3 times. and we do the math check where we have the arrows pointing. You know, it's always the number at the top of stitches or rows that we're going to stop on, and then the number of times that we're going to repeat that, the arrows pointing down to that. And so 5 times 1 is going to tell us 5. We were going to do that once, it's 5. And then 6 times 2, 18. 6 times 3, pardon me, 18. So then we will know that we will have added 4 stitches on each side over 23 rows, and we know the +1, meaning that we've used up that 1 row to make the very first increase at the very top of after working even on our waistline. So we will have done 5 on each side over 24 rows. Okay, Mari.
ウエストの目数が80目で、バストの目数が90目です。そうすると、10目、ウエストからバストに向かって増やすことになります。で、両側に振り分けるので5目ずつです。で、ヒップからウエストまでの減目が終わりましたらば、増減なしで、4センチ、ここで言うと、8段ですね。編んだ後、すぐに、1目、両側1目ずつ減らします。この、減らし方はヒップからウエストに向けてと一緒です。ですから、両側で5目ずつ減らすということは、最初の1段で、1目減らすので、4目残り。それで、増減に使える段数が24段ですから、1段その1目で使うので、23段となります。ですから、右上の計算式、23割る4目という形で計算すると、5段おきに、1回、減目、ごめんなさい、増やし目。それから6段おきに、1回を3回繰り返すと、両側で、トータル10目増やすことになります。
Okay, so now we're up to the top of the bust at the width that we'd like to be at. And as I said before, whether it's at the top of the neckline or whether it's at the top of the arm, you know, for the upper arm, or at the top of the bust, you don't want to make your last increase or decrease or whatever it is that's going to bring you down or up to the fabric width that you want on the last row. So we stop a little bit ahead. Here we're stopping 2 inches to work even. We've now opened up our garment to the point of where we would like to have it to fit that bust based on the ease measurement and the circumference that we want, and the circumference broken in half. And now we're going to work 2 inches for comfort in that area. And so that's going to be 6, we're getting 6 rows to an inch, so it's going to be 12 rows that we're going to work. And that will bring us to the armhole, where we will start to think about the V-neck shaping as we make the armhole.
Okay. 増減目の段が最後の段にならないようにします。それは形がきれいにスムーズに移行するためです。この場合、バストの、増し目が終わった後、アームホールまでの距離は2インチ、5センチですね。12段になります。で、これから上に上がっていくわけですが、今回は V ネックなので、アームホールと一緒に V ネックのことを考えていかなければなりません。
Okay, so next, Quinn, next. Okay, so we're taking a look at the V-neck and thinking of how we would like to have our V-neck open. So there are 3 different ways. You can have it more concave, and that it would be more rounded at the bottom, meaning that you would use, if you're going to have 2 different sets of numbers for opening it, you would use the smaller numbers first, and then the larger numbers of rows that you would skip before you're opening up, before you're making the decrease. We're making 1 decrease pretty much on every row. But how do we space the rows? It can be every 4th row, every 2nd row, depending on how much width we have to get out. So we would make the smaller numbers. Let's say if we have 2s and 4s, we may do all 2s at the bottom and then all 4s. So we open up and then go a little more straight. Convex would be the opposite, where we would use the longer number of rows first, which would be like if it's 2 and 4, every fourth row, we would stack those and then open it up more quickly as we go toward the neckline, the top of the neckline. If we want to do what we're going to do, which is to have a straight diagonal, we're going to intersperse and do the calculations to intersperse the number of rows that we're going to be skipping before we're making the decreases. Okay, Mari?
V ネックの形なんですが、空きの形なんですが、段数の並べ方で、3つに分けられます。左側が、引っ込んだ形っていうのかしら、カーブを描いて、広がる形です。で、真ん中のが、今度は持ち上がるカーブですね。なります。で、あとは平均的に減免をして、直線にする形です。
Okay, next. All right, so this is what it's going to look like. And here we see two things happening. First, at the bottom, when we look at that horizontal line, we see that we're still at a point where we've got all the bust stitches there because we haven't started shaping our armhole yet. And then we've got the dotted lines that show us what's going to happen once we take the armholes out, once we do the shaping for that. And then across the top, we're reminded that we also have a section that we're going to work even on. And here it's not going to be a long section, but again, we're going to stop a little bit before we get to the top. So that's pretty much what we're seeing here.
今見ていただいているのが一番下の緑の横のラインがバストのラインです。で、バストのラインから、点線で上がっていったラインが、これがアームホールの減免が終わった後の、ラインです。で、そのまま上がっていって V ネックの、傾斜が終わった後、まっすぐ上に向かって増減なしで編む部分があります。
Okay, next. So here's some numbers that we're going to attach to this. And so we know that this is standing alone so that we can focus on it, but it's really not standing alone. It's fitting into the top of our garment. And so we've done the 13.5 inches. We know that that's where we're going to go. We know that we're starting off with the 90 stitches. Taking a look at the length from the beginning of the armhole shaping to the shoulders. Here we've made the shoulders flat, but to the shoulders it's the same. It's going to be 8.25 inches or 21 centimeters or 50 rows. If we look at the side, we say, okay, so how do we break the 50 rows so that we have a little bit to work even? We're going to take 1 centimeter, which is 1/2 inch, 4 rows, and it's going to leave us with, instead of having 50 rows, we're going to have 46 rows that we're going to shape over, and then we will work 4 rows even. The neck width is the same, which is 6 3/4 inches. That's 1/2 of the cross back of 13.5. And the number of stitches in the neck are 34. That hasn't changed. We're just rearranging what we're going to do versus a high round to a V, as I said before. And then the shoulders, of course, are going to remain the same, meaning that we're going to have half the shoulder, half the total cross back width in the shoulders, but divided in half. So we had 34, we divided in half, and then we put the remaining, we split it and put it in the shoulders. So there we've got 18, 18, 17 plus 1 in the shoulders. Okay.
今見ていただいているのがV ネックエリアなんですけども、これはここだけ書いてありますが、実際は身ごろ下の部分からつながって書いてある部分です。肩下がりがない形にしてあります。それでもアームホールの丈は同じです。肩下がりがあるものと同じです。それで肩とネックなんですけれども、背肩幅からネック幅を引いて2で割ったものが肩の幅になります。
Okay, and so next, yeah. This tells the whole story. And that is that we want to stop and think about everything that we have to do to shape this V-neck. We have everything in our mind because we've done it a few times now. We've done it with the hip to waist shaping, the waist to bust shaping. We did it last week with the sleeve shaping, the arm of the sleeve, and we're going to do it again here. And that is that we look at how much we have in the, first of all, in the neck. And then we're going to subtract how much we have at the bottom, larger number or smaller number being subtracted. So we've got 34 stitches total in our neck. We're taking away 2. That tells us that we have 32 stitches remaining. And then we're going to divide that in half. Same thing that we did earlier with hip to waist and waist to bust. Divide it in half, which lets us know that we have 16 stitches to decrease on each side. Then when we look down at the rows, we have 50 total rows in the V, which we just went over. And then we're going to have a ½ inch that we're going to work even. So that's going to be 50 minus 4. It's going to give us 46. And then when we look at the start of the V, we have to come across that first row, and then we have to come back to the center before we're going to work that first shaping. So we're going to take 2 rows out at the bottom. So we've got 50 starting, minus 6 actually. So minus the 2 at the bottom, minus the 4 working even. So that's going to leave us with 44 rows. So we now know that we're going to take out or decrease 16 stitches on each side over 44 rows.
ここで書いてあるのは、V ネックの、減目の計算方法です。これ1個ずつやっていくとちょっと時間が足りなくなりますので、日本人の方は後ほどこれハンドアウトの方でお渡ししますので確認してください。Okay.
Okay, so let's go to the next. Okay. And so this is the actual way we're going to calculate, and that is what we'd like to do is, we talked about this last week in one of our examples, and the video is online, and that is that we always want to come back to the same side of the fabric. So on one side of the V, we're going to always be coming back on to the right side, and on the opposite side of the V, we're always going to be coming back, because we want to come back to that neck edge on the left side. We're going to be making the decreases. So here, what we're doing is taking out half the rows. So meaning that we're not going to use wrong side rows. We're not going to count them they're in there, of course. We're not going to count them in our calculations on the right when we're working on the right side, on the left-hand side, which is the right front of the garment. And we're not going to count in right side rows when we're working on the opposite side. And so we've got 16 into 22, which gives us a 1. And that lets us know that each time we multiply all of that by 2, because we're going up by 2 rows. That's why we've taken the others out. That we're going to make our decreases on every second row 10 times, and on every 4th row 6 times. So if we do the math check, we see 2 times 10 is 20 rows that we're going to cover, and 4 times 6 is 24. It's going to give us 16 stitches that we're going to be taking out over the 44 rows. Again, we look for a common denominator because I want this to go up straight. Remember, I want it to go on a straight diagonal versus, opening big at the, quickly at the bottom, and then, or opening slowly and then more rounded at the top. I want it to go straight. So I want to intersperse the way I'm doing it. So I'm going to find a common denominator, which happens to be 2. You see that off to the side, which is giving you the decrease sequence. So we divide the 10 by 2, and we divide the 6 by 2. And that tells us that we're going to do every second, skipping 2 rows. We're going to do that 5 times to skipping the 3 times to skipping the every 4th row. And so we're going to have to intersperse that, and you'll see on the next page how we do that.
Okay. V ネックのトータルの シェーピングのごめんなさい、V ネックに使われる、段数は全部で50段あります。そのうち、上の肩の部分ですね、増減なしで編むところが4段あります。それでシェーピングに使う段数が46段になるんですが、一番最初の、V ネックの一番下の部分2目減目するところはね、センターですね。そこの部分で2目使うので、2段使うので44段となります。で、先週のハンドアウト見ていただいた方は分かるかと思うのですが、2段で1組という形で減目していくので、これを2で割ります。で、16目減らしていきます。そうすると右側に出てくるように2段と4段の組み合わせになります。で、ストレートにするために、これを比率で均等の比率でばらけて並べます。細かいことは後ほどハンドアウトの訳の方で確認してください。Okay.
Okay, great. Next, Quen. So this is what it's going to look like, and this is what we want to be aware of, and that is everything that's going to happen. Sometimes you read a pattern and it says at the same time, because sometimes there are things happening at the same time. Last week we were shaping our shoulders and our back neck at the same time, so that has to be planned for. Here we're going to shape our armholes at the same time as we're beginning to shape the V-neck. And for, remembering last week, 12 rows over, over the time that we're going to be shaping the V-neck, we're also going to be shaping the armholes. So last week, as you recall, we took 10 stitches out over 12 rows. We started with a 1/2 inch of stitches, and so we had 3, and then 2. We had 3, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so we've set this up here, which is what, the way you may want to work. So you see that on each of the rows, what's coming out at the same time. Mari, you want to?
いや、今見ていただいている表が V ネックの、シェーピングとアームホールの最初のバインドオフですね。それの関わり合いの表です。今2つに分かれてるんですが、真ん中のところにあるのが、段の、1段目2段目という数です。それから下に下がっていって、それから右側の表に移っていきます。で、その両側の内側の両側が、V ネックの減目で、その最初の外側にあるのが、アームホールの減目になります。
Okay. Next, Quen. All right, so here again, we want to make sure that we understand what we're doing. So first, on that very, very first row, we look at how many stitches we're going to come across. And we're going to come across, we have 44 stitches. Actually, we've got 90 stitches on our needles. We're going to take out 2 stitches in the center. So 90, of course, minus the 2 is going to be 88. Divided in half is going to tell us that we're going to have 44 stitches on each side of the center 2. So as we're thinking on the last chart that you just went through, we subtract the number of stitches that we're going to take out first, which are 3, from the 44. And as we're writing our pattern, we would be saying, bind off the first 3 armhole stitches, work across 41, which is 44 minus 3, bind off the center 2, and then work across the remaining 44 stitches. As we look in the way that we've said, we're going to have 5 2 times, 5 every 2 rows, interspersed. There are 8 stops along each way to get us to 22. We've got 44. Our denominator, the common denominator was 2, so it tells us that we're going to repeat those 8 stops twice. And so here, if we just written it on, so we've got 2, 2, and then 4 rows, then 2 rows, 4 rows, and then 2, 2, and then 4 rows. So we've gotten 3 rows coming out that were 4 row intervals, and we have 5 that were 2 row intervals, and that ends on row 22, 23 on one side, 22 on another. And then we do it again for 22 more rows. So that gives us our 44 rows that we're shaping in, and then at that point we're going to work even. We've come across the front, back to the neck, we've used up 2, and then we're going to start to work our ratio, our interspersing ratios. And also, Mari, after she does the translation, I will go into one other part of this.
今チャートで見ていただいているのが計算式と、今まで話してきた、V ネックの一番下のセンターステッチが2目あるっていうのと、それから、2段置きと4段置きを、組み合わせて、比率の正しい組み合わせでもって、直線にして最終的に増減なしの段を上に上げているということになります。でここには書いてないんですが、これと同時にアームホールの減目も入ってますので、編み方を書くときにはアームホール3目減目したら、残りのアームホールの減目の分と、それからネックのこれから働く分、センターステッチまでを足した目数を編んで、それから、センターステッチをバインドするというふうに考えてください。Okay.
Okay, so if we look at the bottom, once we reattach our yarn, we've come across, we've bound off, and now we're shaping on the left-hand side, which is the right front. We're shaping everything on the right front. And we're coming back to the center of the neck, and we are reattaching our yarn. And we now have to think about how we want that V to look. This is a V with 2 stitches taken out. It's not a single V, which would a single stitch which would mean an odd number. We've got an even number here. And so if we decrease, remember that those 2 stitches included 1 stitch for the right-hand side, which is the left front. It was 1 stitch coming out from the left front, 1 stitch coming out from the right front. That's what the 2 stitches at the bottom represent. However, if we start to then continue to decrease right away, make a bind off right away, we're going to get a rounding at the bottom. So I have, if you look at the chart, which will be in your handouts, we go up, and it's not until the 4th row, which is the 2nd row after we decrease, that we actually make the first decrease. So we made the first one coming across, we reattach, we work all the way over, wrong side row, come back to the right side row, and then we make the first decrease so that we get a very nice crisp V at the bottom.
今一番先にちょっとお知らせしておきたいのは、右側左側の話です。普通に右側といった場合は、来た状態での右側になります。で、向かって右側の場合は、ライトハンドサイドという形になって H が入ります。ですから普通右側って言った場合は来た状態での右側になります。でここで説明終わります。それから、これを編むときには、右側からずっと編んでいきますよね。それでセンターステッチをバインドオフします。それから向かって左側を編みます。それが終わりましたら、今度は向かって右側を編んでいくんですが、その時に、センターに新しく糸をつけてすぐ減目すると、V ネックの一番下が丸くなってしまいますので、1回減目をパスします。ですから4段目で1回目の、1回目の V ネックの、斜めの部分の、減目が入ります。チャート見ていただくとよくわかるかと思います。Okay?
Okay, and at the top, we see that no matter how we've started or how one side starts up higher than the other, we have the same number of rows that we're going to end on. You know, because the garment is going to be the same height, front and back. And so, we just take a look at that. Also, along the side, you see here, when you're looking at these handouts at home, that we've done a total summary. You know, what's in the top, which is 50, working even, -4, leaves us 46. The first two rows, so it tells us 44, leads us down into exactly how we are doing the arrangement for how we want to intersperse. Every 2 rows making one decrease in every fourth row. It shows us the ratio, again, dividing by 2 to let us know we're going to repeat that ratio, which is 3 4 row decreases, fourth row decreases to 5, second row decreases, and then the math check that allows us to understand that it all actually does work. And then the decreasing ratio, just a double check on the decreasing ratio as well. So that all of that lines up on the side.
計算上は左右対称になるのですが、編み物なので、2段ずれます。ただ確認してほしいのは、センターステッチから左右同じ数減命する、それから増減なしで最後編みますけれども、段数は両方とも同じ、段数になります。
Okay, next. Okay, again, there's the option to take a 10-minute break if anyone wants it, and if not, we'll just keep going. So what are they saying, Mari?
じゃあ、トランスレーション、10分ブレイク取った方がいいです。休憩取った方がいいでしょうか。それともこのまま続けても良いでしょうか。Can't hear anything.
Nobody's answering. I saw one thing coming through the chat box. Nothing else is coming into the chat box.
Keep going.
Keep
Keep
going.
going. All right.
じゃあ続けますよ。
Okay, here we go. Okay, so we'll keep going. The next slide, please, Quinn. All right, so now we're going to look at the sleeve. This is the tapered sleeve, and so we ask. Oftentimes, people say, "What's the difference between a taper and a slope?" And a taper is when you open up slowly over a long number of rows. So you have more rows than you have openings. So like a sleeve, for example. A slope is when you take out a lot of stitches over a short number of rows, like a shoulder. You know, like you would get 6, 6, 6. You got 18 stitches coming out over just 6 rows. You know, 3 sets of rows. Here we've got maybe we're adding 25 stitches on each side, but maybe it's over 112 rows. So that's the difference in a taper and a slope.
テーパーとスロープの違いは何ですかということなんですが、テーパーというのは袖のように、段数の方が多くて少しずつ、増えていくという感じです。から、スロープというのは肩下がりのように、ステッチの方が多くて段数が少ない、形になります。
Okay, next. All right, so this is, again, an answer sheet that will let us understand exactly what's going on. We have 2 sets of gauges here at the bottom. One is for the body of the sleeve, and that's going to be the gauge that we've been working at, which is 5 stitches and 6 rows to an inch. And then we have the gauge for the ribbing, which is going to be 7 stitches and 9 rows to an inch. And we're going to work right now with just the gauge that's for the body of the garment. Okay, Mari?
これが、袖のスケマティックです。ゲージは2種類あります。ボディといってごめんなさい、ゴム編みのものとゴム編みのゲージ、これが1インチで7ステッチです。 それから、カフスの上の部分ですね。それがボディの、全体の、ゲージで、これが、1インチで5センチ、5目になります。
All right, so if we look at the schematic, that's going to tell us everything. And this is the next step for all of you, which is laying out your schematics. And so every single length and width we want to have accounted for and to plan the knitting for that. So here we have a two, if we look on the, actually on the left-hand side, then we see that we have a total of 17.5 inches or 44.5 centimeters for the total length of that sleeve to up to the armhole beginning or the cap shaping beginning. Okay?
今見ていただいているこれスケマティックなんですが、これは皆さんに提出していただく形のものとほとんど一緒です。
Okay, so on the opposite side, when we look on the right-hand side, then we break it out. And so we see that we're going to have 2 inches that we're going to work our cuff over. And then we have 15 inches that is going to be the balance, 15.5 inches or it's going to be 39.5 centimeters. That's going to take us the rest of the way up to the top of our sleeve shaping. However, in the midst of that, so that tells us the 17.5, the cuff of 2, and the 15.5. But then in the middle of that, again, we want to work even for a little bit. We want to get to the width that we need, and then we want to work even for comfort. So we have 14.5 that we're going to work, shaping actually, and then we're actually going to work 1 inch even, and that's going to give us our 15.5 inches, and that's after, we've worked the 2 inches. And then our sleeve cap will come in at the top of all that, which will give us another 5 inches on the top. So when we finish, it's going to be 22.5 inches, which will be 57.5 centimeters. And whether you're working in inches or centimeters, you want to make sure that whatever you work on right on one side adds up when you split it out, that it adds up to the total length.
今見ていただいている寸法なんですが、左側の方、17と2分の1インチ、これがカフス作り目から袖山の下までの寸法になります。これを細かく分けると、カフスの高さが2インチ、それから袖山までの、寸法が15と2分の1インチなんですが、袖の弦目からすぐには袖山に入らずに、先ほども言ったように、増減なしの、段数が1インチ入ります。ですから、2インチのカフを編んで、14と2分の1のボディを編んで、増減1インチ編みます。
Okay, so it's again, we're going to do the same thing we did before, and that is looking at the bottom. And how much do we have in terms of stitches? We have, we're starting with a 6.5 or a 16.5, 16.5 centimeter base, and then we're working up to 15 inches at the top, in the very top. And that 15 inches that we're going to have at the top of our upper arm is going to become key in terms of what we do with our cap. So we have 78 stitches at the top. We have 34 stitches at the bottom. We're going to subtract the 34 from the 78. Now we've done this a few times. That's going to leave us 44. Right? And so we are shaping over 14.5 inches, which is 37 centimeters. And that means 88 rows. And we see that off to the right, where we have the 14.5 inches and then the 1 inch worked even to make that 15.5 inches there. So, all right, so we've got 44 stitches to decrease over 88 rows. Of course, we're going to divide that in half because we're going to put half and half. So we have 22 stitches, 22 that we're going to divide into 88. And that tells us that we're going to increase 1 stitch on each side of every following 4th row, and we're going to do that 22 times. Okay, if we look at this is a different kind of a math check because we didn't have a remainder. So that instead of having on the top of that division sign that's off to the left, instead of having a 4 plus a 1 needing, or 4 different numbers needing 2 different numbers to go across the row and splitting out the divisor and having a double remainder, we don't have any of that. We just have the 4 that's going into the 22. You know, so that's every 4th row, 22 times. We're going to increase 1 stitch. Okay, and that's going to give us an 88.
Yeah, sure. That's line's a little bit. Sorry. You got 14.5 inch,
Yes?
and that is started.
Yeah, the line's down a little low. I see it, yes. I
Yeah,
wrote a note to make that. So it looks
Okay.
like it's down at the cuff, which it
Yeah.
shouldn't be. Yes.
Right, okay, good. 計算の方法ですが、88段で、22目片側で増やします。これを計算するとぴったり割り切れるんですね。で、余りとかいろいろつかないので、とても楽な計算になりました。これは4段ごとに1目ずつ増やしていきます。
Okay, so the next. All right, so now we want to start talking about the cap and what we're going to do with the cap. We can go next. Okay, and we can continue. Quinn, let's go to the next one. All right, this is what we've got, starting with the ratio tool. Let's back up. Let's go forward one, Quinn. Let me see where we are with the going
袖
forward.
山の計算に入ります。
Okay, so let's go back one. Let's go back two. I just want to see where we are. Okay, so what we want to do now is just to make a note of everything that we have here. We finished the sleeve. We're up to the cap now. And now we want to write down everything, all the information that we have in order to be able to shape the cap. So we've got 15 inches that we know, and that makes us have 76 stitches. We saw that we had 78 total stitches that we're starting with at the top of the sleeve. That's as high as we went in terms of what we opened. We want to know what we're going to do when we start to shape the cap. And what I always say is just take out, where it says armhole shaping decrease, we usually just take out the first 2 rows in the same way that we took them out on the body of the garment. Because of course we know that this sleeve and cap is going to fit into the double taper or the pullover, the classic body. It's going to fit into that 8 1/4 inch armhole that we have on both of these garments. So then also the depth of the armhole on the garment, and that's 8 1/4 inches for us. And then the number of stitches that would be rounded even to have at the top, we're going to take out 1 inch of rounded stitches. When we look at that top slope, 1 inch of rounded stitches on each side. So we want, we've got 2 sides, we're going to divide it by 2 because we want to do that over a 1/2 inch of rows. So we want to just round both the rows and the stitches to an even number. And so we have 1 inch of stitches is 5. We're going to round it up to 6. And then we have a 1/2 inch of rows, because we have 6 rows to an inch is going to be 3. We're going to round that up to 4. And so it lets us know that if we're going to take out 2 inches of stitches total, that means at the very top, we're going to be taking out 12 stitches over 4 rows. And that's the top slope. So you see the 3 different parts of the sleeve here. The first part is the armhole decrease match. The second part is the center cap. And the third part is the top slope. So we're preparing to go through each part of these There's only one part that we don't know the answers to, and that's the one we'll focus on. That's the center cap. We know that we're going to use 2 rows to take out the first 3 stitches on each side at the bottom to match the garment. We also know that in the top we're going to slope by taking out 1 inch of stitches rounded on each side over a 1/2 inch of rows. But what we don't know is what's going to happen in the center of the cap, and that's what we're going to plan for. In order to figure out the top, the very top, what's going to be our final bind off, what we do is we take the upper arm width, which is 15, we divide it by 4, and that gives us 3 3/4 inches. And from that number, we take away 1/4 inch. And that really rounds it for you to sort of get it in. And so it's like armhole, the upper arm width divided by 4 minus 1/4 inch, which gives us 3 1/2 inches. We multiply that number by the row gauge, by the stitch gauge, pardon me, to see how many stitches are going to be at the top. And so we're going to have 18 stitches at the top. And you see that written at the bottom. So we say 3 1/2 inches is going to be our final bind off times 5 stitches equals 1 inch. It's going to be 18 stitches at the top. So we know right away we're starting off with 78 and we're ending up with 18. Also, we can see right away that we have 12 that we're using at the top. And then we also have, what do we have? And we have 6 stitches that we're using in the first 2 bind offs at the very bottom of the armhole shaping. Okay, Mari, I'm sorry.
袖山のカーブはすべて数字で出していきます。4つに分けられていて、身ごろの方から持ってくる数字と、それと袖幅が分かっているので、袖幅が分かっていて、上のトップスロープというのもゲージから出せます。で、分からないのは、センターキャップ部分で、これも今までやってきた計算で出していきます。今この紙ですよね。この紙の通りに計算するとすべての数字が出てきます。Okay.
Okay, so next, all right, so then we're looking at the ratio tool here. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to go to the next page, Quinn, and we'll come back to this one. Yeah. All right, so let's just take a look at everything that we laid out, the things that we know. Here, the first thing we really want to know is how many rows are we going to have in that cap? And so we're looking at the armhole depth minus 1 1/2 minus.
Sorry?
Yes. Yes?
Maybe your voice is chopping. Is that only me? Everyone okay?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Everyone okay?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, maybe, yeah, my side. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So we have the first the way we want to the first thing we want to say is how long is this sleeve cap going to be? So we have the armhole depth, which is 8 1/4 inches, minus 1 1/2. And 1 1/2 is like the 1 on the formula. It stays there. It's 1 1/2 minus half the final bind off. Okay, and so that tells us that we've got 8 1/4 minus 1 1/2. It's going to give us 6 3/4 minus half the final bind off. The final bind off, can we flip back, Quinn? The final bind off is 3 1/2. So that's going to be 1 3/4. And so 8 1/4 minus 1 1/2 minus 1 3/4 is going to give us 5 inches. that is going to be, we can immediately know the total length of our cap. We multiply that 5 inches by our row gauge, which is 6, and we immediately know that we have 30 rows to shape our cap over, because that's the length of the cap. Okay, Mari?
ここの計算は先週もやったように聞いてるだけだと全然わからないと思うので、私の方でハンドアウト訳しますので、後から読んでください。Okay.
Okay, so then as we roll back and we look at the slope at the top, then we have 6. Let's go back, Quinn. Yes, let's just stay here for a minute. So we have 1 inch of rounded stitches on each side at the top, right? That's going to be 12 because we've rounded them up to 6 stitches equals an inch. So we're going to do that. So it's going to be 6 stitches on each side. It's 12 stitches. We're going to do that over a 1/2 inch of rounded rows. It's going to be 4. And so 4 into 12 is going to tell us that on the last 4 rows, we're going to take out 3 stitches. So 3 stitches 4 times. So we will have decreased 12 stitches as well as we will have taken out 4 more rows. Okay?
これは袖山のトップの部分です。上の部分です。上の部分のカーブの部分の出し方を説明しています。これはゲージの目数と段数から計算します。
Okay, so next, Quinn. All right, so we start to want to know exactly how everything's going to run. And so we've taken a look at the stitches as well as a look at the rows. Stitches, we're starting with 78, 76 plus the 2 selvages. So 78 is where we ended the final shaping with our sleeve. And then we're taking out 6 for the armhole, which is 3 on each side, the same decreases that we did for the body of the garment. That's going to leave us with 72 stitches. And then in the top slope, we're using 12. Again, that brings us down to 60 stitches remaining. And our final bind off is going to be 18 stitches. So all except 42 stitches are counted for. We have 42 stitches that are just there remaining, and those stitches are going to be in our center cap. For the rows, the upper arm, we're starting with 30 total rows, and we did that 5 times. The 6 rows equals an inch after we did armhole depth minus 1.5 minus half the final bind off, determined that it was going to be 5 inches times 6. So we have 30 rows that we're starting with. We're using the first 2 rows to take out the stitches that match the armhole of the garment. That leaves us with 28. And then in the center, we're going to take out we're going to take out 4 actually at the top of the cap, pardon me. So we have the 12 stitches over the 4 rows. So that tells us that we have 24 rows that are unaccounted for, that are just there. And what are we going to do with those 24 rows? We're going to put those in the center. So it allows us to see that we've got everything straightened out, everything figured out, except how we're going to shape that center, which is the biggest part of our cap. Remember, we've got 4 different sections to the cap. We've got the armhole decrease, we've got the cap, the center cap, we've got the top slope, and then we've got the final bind off. So now we've got everything ready to work out, and we've got a math check. So we have on the math check with stitches, we have 78 minus 6 equals 72. Minus 42, we now put the center cap stitches in, and then that's going to leave us with 30, and then the top slope, which will leave us with 18. So this one is going the way we would actually be working. The total stitches minus the armhole decrease would come first, the center cap would come second, and then the third would be the top slope, and then we would have the final bind off stitches remaining there. For the rows, we've got 2 armhole decrease rows. We're adding those to see if it adds up to 30. Plus, we've got 24 center cap rows, gives us 26. And then we have 4 top slope rows, gives us 30. So this verifies that we have to take out 42 stitches over 24 rows. and the
え
center cap. Okay, go ahead, Mari.
はい、Yes。今見ていただいている表は、左側の方が今までの計算で出した段数と目数を書いてあって、計算が合うかどうかを確認しています。で、右側の方はその、計算の検算にあたります。で、これで大体のものは出たのですが、先ほど言ったようにセンターキャップの一番広い部分ですね、そこの減目のレイアウトがまだ分かっていないので、これから計算する形になります。
Okay, so now, Quinn, let's go back and back again. Okay, so this is again the tool that we've been using the whole time. And that is that we're doing just a long division. And that is going to tell us that we're decreasing 42 stitches over 24 rows. However, it's going to change a little bit. Before it was stitches, the number of stitches across the row, and then it was the number of rows that we were going to skip in order to add, and it just keeps changing and morphing into whatever we want it to do. Here, it's going to tell us how many times we're going to use one stitch and how many times you're going to use two stitches in order to shape that center cap. And so we're going to take out one stitch 6 times, and we're going to take out 2 stitches 18 times. And the reason is because we've got such a close ratio between the 5 and the 6. 5 stitches and 6 rows to an inch. So the cap's going to be, a little bit more squat. There are certain circumstances where you'll have more rows than stitches. This time we've got more stitches than rows. And that a circumstance of more rows than stitches will be in a part of your handouts. But here, as we take a look, then we see that we also have a ratio that comes in. We have 18 and we've got 6, of course. We're going to divide it. And so the ratio is going to be 3 to 1. So we're going to be doing 3 2s to 1 1. And we do a math check here, and we're able to see that we're going to be able to decrease 42 stitches over the 24 rows. Okay. Mari?
Yes. 今まで計算したのと同じ方法で計算します。で、その同じ方法で計算すると、1目の減目と2目の減目になります。で、これを正しい比率で、並べていきます。Okay.
Okay. So, Quen, we can go forward and forward again and forward again. All right, so this starts to be the way we would be laying out the flow of decreasing for our cap. And so here you see at the description that I have written there, it says 6 stitches, and that's 2 each side bound over 2 rows. And you see that, the 3 and the 3. 3 stitches each side, over 2 rows. So you see the 3 and the 3. And then you start to see in the center cap the ratio, and you see you see the 2 2 2 1 and the 2 2 2 1, and you see that continuing there in the center cap. Quen, can you go forward again? And that continues until we get to the top slope. And then when we're at the top slope, then we're binding off 3 stitches on each side, 6 on each side. So 3 stitches at the beginning of the final 4 rows. And that leaves us with the 18 stitches. That's going to be our final bind off at the top. And so if we look at the very side and we see the stitch decrease summary, we see 6 in the armhole, 42 in the center cap, 12 in the top slope, 18 in the final bind off, and our upper arm total, which is where we started, would be 78. Okay, Mari? So Quen, you can go back one and let Mari run through this.
Thank you. これの今まで計算したものをまとめて図にしたものです。見てお分かりになるように、左側の数字が並んでいる真ん中が、段のナンバーです。1番目、2番目というふうになってます。で、両側が、減目の数です。Next, please.
Okay, next slide.
No,
Forward.
go
One
for,
forward,
yeah,
forward, one.
24.
There
Yeah,
you
thank
go.
you.
Okay.
で、これで、トップスロープが終わって、それで最終的なバインドオフで終わりとなります。でこれを右側のところでまとめたものが、アームホールで 6名がセンターキャップで42名と続いて全部足すと、袖幅の78名となります。
Okay. And you will have a set of a blank set to fill out for your own numbers in your handouts.
皆さんにはハンドアウトでブランクのものを提供しますので、自分のゲージと数字と寸法で書いてください。
Okay. Quinn, next. So this is what our cap will actually look like. And so you see along the sides, where we're bounding off, you see that we start off with 3, and then you see that 2, 2, 2, 1, that 3 to 1 ratio all the way up. You see that being repeated 3 times. And then you see the top slope with 3 stitches coming out on both sides over 4 rows. And you see the final bind off of 18. At the bottom, you see the count going across. That tells you that we're starting with 78 stitches.
で今までの計算のものを一つのチャートにまとめたものです。最初の3名のバインドオフと最終的な一番最後のファイナルバインドオフが全部その通りに書いてあります。
Okay. And so next. All right. Are there any questions before I just go through just taking a look at some of the bodies that are double tapers and set in sleeves? So are there any questions?
Alright. ここまでで質問があったらお知らせしてください。
Okay. So what you get to see is, of course, that using the shaping formula, we can very easily organize everything. And also that it is the same formula used over and over again, just used for different things. How many stitches are we going to take out? How many stitches are we going to increase? How many stitches are we going to decrease? How many stitches are we going to decrease around a row? All of that done the same way, just using the shaping formula, which is a very handy tool. We call it the ratio tool when you want to intersperse, so that you get a very even distribution of increases and decreases.
割り算の縦計算はいろんなところで使えますので、それと比率ですね、比率の出し方もいろんなところで使えますので、チャンスがあるごとに使ってください。
Okay, so that's the end of that presentation, and I just wanted to walk through just some looks at some of the garments that I've done, and a look at what the double taper body looks like, which is what we've done today. And then, since you're all thinking about putting your schematics together and doing your final layout when you're going to start knitting your garment, just pattern flow and being able to really look at some of the things we can do. This is the New York Noir. And Mari was the knitter on this one as well. And it is, I remember we had to rip out the back on that one. I said just wind it all up so that as you rip out, so that it's all ready to go again. But this is a double taper body and a set in sleeve.
これ見ていただいているのがセットインスリーブのダブルテーパーになります。
Okay, the next. This again, the body is rounded, but it's a double taper again.
これは前縦の部分が丸くなってますが、ダブルテーパーのセットインスリーブです。
Okay, and then next, Quinn. So this is different. This is something that I wanted to just talk with you a little bit about. So all of you have seen this pattern. Some of you have chosen it on our cables, on our DAL's cables chart. And can you go to the next page, Quinn? This is the main pattern chart. And many times we want to just take some parts out of the different patterns to deconstruct and use them in different ways. So here we see the main pattern and the flow of that. But as my eye is looking at it, I'm seeing small patterns within that. I'm seeing a circle and a diamond, a circle and a diamond, and I'm seeing what's hooking that on together are these small little. They here on the chart, it looks almost they look like little crosses, but they're little wrapped sections. And so if you go back, Quinn, one, I just pulled those out and made a separate chart of those. And I used those on the edgings at the beginning, at the bottom of the garment, as well as on the sleeves. And those are the types of things that, as you really study your pattern stitches and you want to echo, what we call echo, meaning echoing the parts of the pattern stitch on different parts of your garment, that's where that starts, that idea of just looking more deeply into your garment and then laying out a full-fledged chart for that. Mari, okay?
Yes. この、ステッチパターン、皆さん見てると思いますが、課題のステッチパターンのケーブルの部分に入っている、ステッチパターンです。で、これがオリジナルの、今見ていただいているのがオリジナルのステッチパターンなんですけれども、これの中でシャーリーが、スモーキングが入ったお花の形みたいな丸い形なものとダイヤモンドの形が見ることができます。で、これを、一部を取り出して、配列し直すという作業というのは、Can you go back to 28th, please? Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, thank you. これを見ていただくと、スモーキングの丸いお花みたいなのがだけ取り出して、新しく、組み合わせになります。これがやりていたその一部を取り出して、配列し直したものです。こうやって使っていきます。OK。
Okay, so you can go forward and forward again. Yeah, and here again, and we have to say Mari was the knitter on this again, and
The
forward.
big one.
Yeah, that was a big one. And just looking very closely at pattern flow. Again, if you look at that collar at the top, on the top right-hand side, then you will notice that every twist stitch that runs down from the collar runs directly into the twist stitch that's on the ruffle. And that is, just so important. If you look at how the twist stitches come up and make a sort of an up and down pattern going across, that when she puts her arm down, the zig going up hooks in so that the zig going down happens. If you look at the shoulder, you'll see that we made it so that only the zigzag portions touched each other at the shoulder and made a diamond in the way the pattern stopped at the shoulder and then ran back down in the front and the back of the garment. Also, just the flow from just my charts, and we're just working from my worksheets as I'm looking at these at the different pattern stitches, and then the way you can see very closely how we're decreasing in that bell cuff to bring those veins of the bell cuff right into the pattern. And those are all the things that makes this a joy for us to really examine and create something very beautiful that is visually stimulating for the observer.
これ今見ていただいているのが、ダスターなんですけれども、シャーリーが一番その気をつけたことは、このステッチパターンの流れです。ブツブツ切れないで全てつながっています。後ろ襟のところを見ていただくと分かると思うんですが、右側の上の写真ですね、後ろ襟の、模様が、フリルの、模様のラインとつながっています。 それと、袖の、ベル袖になってるんですが、ベル袖のラインが、ステッチパターンのラインとこれもつながっています。それとちょっと見にくいんですが、袖山の、パターンと肩のところのつながりはもうきれいに最初から計画してつながるようになってます。きれいにつながるようになってます。苗字体はそこで切れるんですけれども、ですから編む前に全てこれは計算して計画して間違いがないように迷わないように計画した状態で編んでいきます。
Okay, so when we talk about competing, what we're doing is reaching inside for the best in ourselves and the best that we can bring to our craft in terms of what we do with this fabric. And that's what this whole DAL is about. It's for those of you who are not officially competing, you're competing with yourself to say, you know, what can I bring that's going to be just stunning and beautiful to the world from my knowledge and my background in knitting, and what can I take away from the wonderful community that we all join hands together each time. This is the 6th time we've done this DAL, that we all join hands together and try to accomplish together, learning from each other, caring for each other, sharing, exchanging all that we can, and soaking up and putting out into the world, like Duets, the book that came as a result of a number of DALs before, and I'm the publisher on that book. Just to let the world see how beautiful our craft is. And it is really an art form, and this is handmade artwork. Okay, Mari?
コンテストに参加している人ばかりではなく、DAL 一般的なクラシック DAL に参加している方もそうなんですが、自分を信じて自分のクリエイティビティ、想像力を高めて、それでいろんな人に見ていただいて、仲間と一緒にコミュニケートしながらいいものを作っていく。そしてそれを世界の外側の人たち、編み物の世界ではなくて外側の人たちにも見ていただくことを目指しています。ですからこの DAL の中で、一緒に編んでる方たちとコミュニケーションをとって想像力を高めながら、お互い褒め合って、それでいいものを作っていきましょう。
Okay, Quinn, next. And this is the final, just to look at pattern flow again. And this is, if you look at the bottom at the center there, then you see how I've worked a cable crossing to run into the cabling of the pattern stitch. And then if you take a look at that happens at you can see it in that center picture, both for the cuff as well as for the body of the garment, so that would flow unbroken. And then if you look at, with her arm down, how that cable pattern runs very neatly. It's a recurring theme, you know, with my work. It runs very neatly from across the arm and across the top of the body, and it all lines up perfectly. That also with this, we were doing cables at the end as well as at the beginning of the piece, and so we actually do the crossing as we are casting on, and we do the crossing again as we're binding off, so that we have no splay at all in the cables, but everything is tightened down very tightly. Okay.
これはステッチパターンの、流れについて見てもらうための写真なんですが、これも課題のステッチパターンの中に入っているかと思います。手を下ろした時の、袖とボディの、ステッチパターンの関連性とか、あとは袖口と、裾のゴム編みと、ステッチパターンの流れ、それから肩 とか、まあ模様が切れるところですね。そこで編み地が広がらないように工夫するとか、襟と袖口と模様の関連性とかいろいろ最初に計画して、それで出来上がったものです。これが一番最近の作品かしら。
Okay. So that's it. Quinn, if you click the next one, I think we're pretty much done.
これで全部終わりになりました。
Yeah, that's it. So for those of you who are competing, you will all be reporting directly to me as your coach. The other coaches who are more than capable and who are as wise as I am will be helping all of you. And just to let everyone understand, the only concern and job of the coaches is to help you and support you. They're not the judges. I'm not the judge. None of us are judging. We're just helping here as helpers. So that's the energy that we're bringing to everything, and just wanting to have everyone have their best foot forward and to really have a wonderful learning experience.
コンテストに参加の皆さんは、シャーリーがコーチングをします。で、他の3人のコーチは皆さんの担当になるんですけれども、評価はしません。サジェッションとか、あとはサポートとか、助言とか、皆さんがやりたいことを確実に、実現できるように助けるというのが私たちの役目ですので、自分がしたいということをこちらの方にぶつけて相談してみてください。
Okay. So that's it. If anyone has any questions, then we're all here for that. Were there any questions in the chat box?
質問がある方いらっしゃいますか？
I have a clarification question about the schematic submission on the, I believe it's the 18th.
Yes.
Is that a working schematic that you're looking for, or is it like a general schematic that would be like in a publication?
It's a working schematic.
Okay.
Because from that we can glean what's going to happen. And we'd also like to see your notes. We'd like to see, we're going to give you a handout that's going to come along with the handout from the presentation tonight that will guide you through just looking at the way I lay out a schematic and think about every element on it. And so at the end of the day, we will be able to see if you have, like, for example, you say you want 20 inches and you've got, let's say you've got a pattern stitch that is a four stitch repeat, then we know you need 5 of those going across. And so we want to see you working through that. And so we can understand that. And when we are ready to if for those of you who are competing, do whatever, turn your garments in for Vogue, you'll be able to do a formal schematic from that.
今の質問なんですが、2月の18日締め切りの提出物、スケマティックは雑誌に載ってるようなスケマティックか、もしくはワーキングスケマティックかという質問でした。シャーリーの方の答えはワーキングスケマティックで、そのスケマティックの中で何が起こっているかというのが分かるようなメモを少し入れておいてくださいということです。というのは、例えば 4目ずつの繰り返しがある、ステッチパターンがどこに入って何回繰り返しかというのを少しメモを入れておいてください。なおかつ、今日の、ハンドアウトの方に、その旨を書いておきますので、後から、確認をお願いします。
Okay. And we've had this in every DAL. This is my 9th event that I've sponsored. We've had 3 KALs, and this is the 6th DAL. And in every DAL, we've had everyone have to go through the steps that you're going through. Tell us what you're doing, send us your schematic, and then we've all started to work on our garments. And so that's where we are now.
で今まで過去の DAL でも同じことをやってきました。スケマティックを提出していただいてチェックするという作業が入ってます。皆さんも同じようなステップで進んでいます。
Okay. Anybody else with any
他に質問ありませんか？
Okay. Thanks so much for coming. Hope you got a lot out of it. You have notes, you have our handouts, you have our way of thinking. I mean, there's nothing that I haven't laid bare before you on the table so that everyone can, really set up a way to follow. That's what this is all about. Just saying, you want to be where, look, we're making, shaping, sizing all at the same time. If that's not organized, you're going to have a problem. And we don't want ripping. We want you to just plan your work, then work your plan. So all of this is showing you my method. Not the only method out there, of course, but this is my method, and you're here to spend some time with me right now. But all of this and all that we're handing out is to just help you to understand a method, and you'll develop your own. And I have changed, and each time I've taught this, someone has taught me something else in the class. And so I'm looking forward to learning again. And you will add new things to the way we're working and bring your own way of working to it all. And we encourage that. And we want you to bring your art to this. And, so we'll have stories to tell about what you did as well.
今日、マスタークラスは私のやり方です。ここ以外では別のやり方があるかもしれませんが、今回お伝えしたのは私のやり方で、私のやり方も時としてはアップデートすることもあります。ですから皆さんからの情報なんかもとてもありがたく受け取りたいと思うので、もし何かご意見がありましたらご遠慮なくおっしゃってください。でこれからと一緒に、あなたが作り出すアートですね、創造的な表現方法を世界に向けて発信していきましょう。
Okay, so Ellen, she said she had a question that was unrelated.
エレンさん、何か質問ですか？
Ellen.
Oh, yeah, I could jump in. I've totally unrelated to the design class, but as I look at the yarns you chose for the competition, they're all gorgeous yarns. And I wondered if it's allowable to use the discount code to buy extra yarn beyond what we're using for our particular sweater.
Yeah, you can. Everybody can, from any of the yarn companies. Actually, for those of you who are competing, you have to buy, you have to get the yarn that we're competing with. But beyond that, while the discount codes are up, I think it's a one-time code for each, which is for, your initial and then for whatever, you're doing for those of you who's watching. But yes, the answer is yeah.
でエレンさんからの質問なんですが、デザインのことではないんですけれども、系統が発表になりました。系統っていうのは実際使わなくてもディスカウントコードを使って買えるもんでしょうかということだったんですが、1件につき1つは買えます。ですから一つの会社から自分の生態を買って残りは後から編もうかなというので他の会社からディスカウントコードを使って買うこともできます。期限がありますので2月の16日だったかな、それまでに必要な方は買ってください。
Okay. Anybody else with any questions?
他に質問ありませんか
People said thank you in the chat.
Oh, that's great. Okay, you're welcome. I also want to add that for those of you who are in the classic part of the DAL, one of the most rewarding parts of it for all of us has been posting on Ravelry. as your garment starts to grow. And there are a lot of you who are in the classic part of the DAL. So as you start to knit and you can put those out there. Start to post a few things and let's get the conversation going on that. Don't worry about what you don't understand. There's always, for all of us, there's lots of things I don't understand either. But each time we do a design, we're all learning and moving. I'm doing some designs now and I'm wandering up a hill. But that's the way that all works. But, just to keep the conversation going and to let us see what you're creating and to let us all just immerse ourselves in this experience. It's not going to be long. It's going to be over in April. And we're already in mid-February. And we've already been at it for a month. So it will go quickly, but it can be an awful lot of fun. If those of you who look back or who were in the KAL last year for the Peacoat, it was a blast. And, just the idea of everybody going up the mountainside with the cats, we kept putting more cats and everybody's trying to find the cats on the mountain. But everyone was working really hard and creating just the most amazing things. And for those of you who've seen the Vogue Knitting article, you see all 21 of those people lined up on the hill. And it was just wonderful. And I'd love to have that again, just to keep the conversation positive, talk to your coaches, keep working, use your creativity, and let us just have a really good time.
ですね、クラシック DAL に参加の皆さんは、ソーシャルメディアとかラベリーとか、ラベリーがいいかな、写真を上げてもらって構わないです。で、それでKL の時に参加した方もいらっしゃると思うんですが、その時のように写真を上げて、それで情報を交換してください。わからなくなったら一緒に編んでる方に聞いてもいいし、私たちの方で答えることもできますし、お互いにコミュニケーションを取っていただけるとありがたいです。
Okay, then if there are no other questions, I thank you all for coming, and we will see
Surely
you.
there were some more questions in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay, so what are they? You can tell me what they are, Judy.
Yeah, so Jan was asking a question about the post. It's a couple of questions out here about what competitors can post on Ravelry. I think you've already stated that only you post on Ravelry if you're participating in the classic DAL.
Yes, that's it. Those of you who are in the classic DAL, as we've done before, we've all had a really good time. And at the end of it all, to have yourselves, we want you to try on your garments, and that's been just the way we've run all the DALs, just to say that this does fit, or the person you're making it for will have it on, and so we can all just really give you accolades for actually making that achievement. And so, yes.
Yeah, and the other question is about coaching. The question about having a specific coach. I think we've already also said that we're going to be coaching in teams.
Yeah, and that will be coming, and that is just like things will keep coming out. We've been running pretty fast, and so everyone was saying, when's the yarn coming? When's the yarn coming? And then the yarn came, and a lot of you have already placed your orders for the yarn, which is great. And then the next step is the coaching, and it will unfold. We've been thinking it through, and so you will be assigned a coach based on whatever. It could be random, but you will have help. That's the key. That's the most important thing, and you will have support.
And that was it.
Okay, hold on. I need to translate. 一つ目の質問はちょっとダブってるんですけれども、コンテストの方は写真は載せられません。で、クラシック DAL に参加の方のみ、ラベリーの方へ写真が載せられます。から2つ目のクエスチョンは、コーチングはどのようになるのでしょうかということなんですが、まだ一人一人という形にはなっていませんが、グループでやろうというふうな形になっています。
Okay. Okay, if we are done, if we're not,
Yeah, we're done. There are no more questions. We're good.
okay, because we had until 11, actually, you know, we had 2 hours that we had planned for, but since we didn't take a break, then we were like 15 minutes ahead of time. So those of us who are on the East Coast get to, you know, go to bed a little bit earlier. And the others on the West Coast of the US, you know, get to, you know, go play with your family after your dinner. And the rest of you have a good time this afternoon. It's already heading into noon, I guess, in Japan. We're heading into, yeah, almost 1 o'clock.
ありがとうございます。時間通りに済みましたね。休憩を挟まなかったので、11時より、予定の時間よりも少し早く進みました。東海岸に住んでいる方はこれからお休みになります。ね、それで西海岸の方はきっとファミリーと一緒の時間を過ごすのではないかと思います。で、日本にいらっしゃる方は、今日まだ始まったばかりですから、今日一日楽しんでください。
Okay, great. Okay,
Mom, I had
thanks
a lot of
everybody.
compliments on your translation skills. They're saying, thank you for your brilliant translation. And Mari is awesome.
Thank you to Mari.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank
Mari's
you.
everywhere, online, on the forums, we're eternally grateful, Mari. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm pleasure.